Hi everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm so glad you are here. So I decided that this year I actually need to pick up my reading. I used to read all the time. You guys probably saw some of our older book reviews and I haven't been actually keeping up with my reading. So it's already end of January and I finished 3 books so far. Not to brag. So before we dive into this book review, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and all that good stuff. If you do not know who I am, my name is Nicole. I'm the founder here of Epiphiana Magazine. On our website, you will find articles written by a lot of different writers, but here on YouTube, it would just be me. If you're here on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us here on Facebook. Don't forget to like this video, like our page, and all that good stuff. So another thing I wanted to do was actually start reading more books by Latinas, Latinos, Latinx, however they identify themselves, Hispanic, whatever term they use. Because I realized I just wasn't, and I thought that was quite interesting. So one of the books I finished and what I'll be reviewing today is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. Now, before we dive into this review, I also want to say this is going to be sort of a series, if you will. You guys have to hold me accountable. As every month, I'm going to review a book I read that is by a Latina or Latinx or Latino author. Now, this book is a young adult fiction. Right off the bat, the reason why I love this book was at the title, because a lot of times growing up, I didn't feel like the perfect Mexican daughter. So I thought that was a really good title. Now, my book reviews are always going to have spoilers because I feel like I can't really review the book without telling you guys a little bit about what the book is about. So sorry about that. The book is written by Erica Sanchez, and she even admits she puts a good amount of her life into this book, but it's still a fictional book, right? It's still like, it's not, you know, a memoir, it's not her biography, but she takes some aspects of her life into this book. So the main character, Julia, is a first generation Mexican American, or Mexican. She identifies herself as Mexican in the book. Her parents crossed the border. They are undocumented. They live in Chicago. So she's growing up, and I want to say she is growing up in modern times, so like 2000s. There's a lot of references to things that are just going on now, you know, little things like cell phones and certain artists. So I think it is really around the 2000s. I don't think it's like today, but definitely like early 2000s, 2010. So like I said, she lives in Chicago. She lives with her parents. Right off the bat, the first chapter of the book is her sister has passed away. Her older sister, who was, in her mind, the perfect Mexican daughter. And her sister actually dies quite tragically, getting hit by a semi-truck because her sister didn't look up from her phone when she was crossing the street. And it was a really traumatic death. The teenager in me totally could relate to some of the angst of the main character. The adult that I am was sort of like, honey, calm down. So right off the bat, from the title of the book, from the relationship you can see in the beginning between Julia's parents and her older sister Olga, and between her and her parents, she doesn't feel like the perfect Mexican daughter. So let me explain to you, in this book context, and especially in a lot of first generation homes, what exactly does a perfect Mexican daughter look like? She grows up with parents who crossed the border, made it here, and are just so used to a certain way of life. A certain way of life is your kids do not leave. They absolutely do not leave your home. Even if they go to college, they should just go to a college nearby but still live at home. They should go to church with you every Sunday. They're basically, your kids should be like your best friends. They really shouldn't have like any kind of need for thrill or need for adventure. They go to school, they go to church, they go to home. That's basically it. Well, if you're a kid growing up in America, that's not necessarily the way you might want to live. You might want to have an adventurous life. You might actually want to talk about sex. That's another thing that comes up a lot in this book, is her and her mother never have an open conversation about sex. Her mother doesn't even like watching characters on TV have sex, and sort of squirms and like leaves the room. And that is actually a part I totally relate with. My mom, and I have a lot of aunts who just think it's very, associate sex with dirty and naughtiness. So when it shows up in a movie or show, they just think it's like disgusting. And I'm like, but it's sex, like everyone has it, like come on, like clearly you have it, you have like 4+ kids, like come on now. So I can totally relate to like that part. There's a lot of part of this book that I can relate to, but there's a lot of it that I cannot relate to. I'm not first generation, so there's a lot of her story that I can empathize with, but of course that's not my story. What I appreciated from this book a lot was that it took place, like I said, in modern times, meaning these people need to realize first generations, kids are still going through a lot of culture clash between the culture they're growing up in now and the culture that they have at home. And it's not just something of the past. Every day they're sort of having this like dual identity. And when you're a teenager, you're already having so many problems trying to figure out your own identity, and now you have two clashing ideas of like what your identity should be. So throughout the book, you see that she finds out a lot of information about her sister, information that she didn't think actually, information about her sister's life. Let's just put it this way. Her sister was not perfect. Her sister, you know, maybe didn't have the need for thrill as much as she did, but her sister did have a lover who was married. She was pregnant when she got hit by the bus. She wore lingerie. And what I loved about that was that because this is a young adult book, and I know like there's gonna be younger people reading this book, it was a great reminder to show that every human being has layers. You may think a person's one way, but they're going to have more layers. So throughout the whole book, again, Julia is just going through a lot of teenage angst. And growing up, when you have all that teenage angst and you're growing up in a house where you do not talk about your problems because you have parents who maybe don't believe your problems are real problems, their problems are real. They had to cross the border. They had to build a whole new life here. They don't really speak the language. They don't really understand the culture. Those are problems. So you're growing up in a household where there's not a lot of empathy for the American problems you may have. Growing up in a neighborhood that is very poor, and growing up in a neighborhood and growing up in a family where you don't feel like you can relate to anyone. The main character, Julia, is a big reader. She loves to read, but no one in her family truly understands why she likes to sit and read by herself. They think she's just being offstandish, doesn't want to mingle. She goes to family parties, but she doesn't really want to play. And it's not like she hates her family. It's just that's just not something that, you know, excites her. And so she's like living, there's this, like, she's just trying to read her book at this party because she doesn't really like, she doesn't want to play in the games. And instead of like her family members actually asking her about what she's reading and what interests her about the book or anything like that, they just sort of scoff at her and make her feel bad for reading at a party, and why isn't she helping anyone like cook, and why that's another thing her mom gets on her, that she's a woman, she can't cook. Why isn't she playing with her cousins? And again, that was something else I could relate to. And it's sort of just, she feels like she can't really be herself, and she's always in conflict. In the book, the conflict does build up, and you start to see that she actually, it's not just teen angst. It's, you know, she does have depression. She does have anxiety. There's a moment where she does try to kill herself. She doesn't die. That's awesome. And I like that came up. I like that it also showed about going to therapy, not just individual therapy, group therapy. So it ends with her going to college. That's another thing, is her family can't really understand why she would want to go to college away. Instead of her parents thinking of it as her going to college again, they're thinking of it as her going away. But towards the end of the book, they sort of come around to the idea that she's going to New York for college. They are happy she got in, but I think they're just more sad because their daughter is starting to have more and more of a life that they might not be able to understand. But what I love is that Julia has this understanding now as like a 17, 18-year-old, that if she goes to school, she will be able to provide her parents and be able to offer them more than if all she did was like stay at home and go to the community college and just worked at an office. You know, she would be able to give them more. And one of the last lines is like, she hopes that like one day like her parents can see that too, that she's doing this also for them, to help give them a better life, instead of being angry and holding in all her feelings and seeing her parents as the enemy and seeing them as so different. At the end of the book, the main character Julia, she really gets to the point where she could see that like her parents struggles, and she found out a lot about her parents when she went back to Mexico and spent time with her family there, and hearing their story of how they crossed over and how her parents were and things that happened to them when they were crossing. And so really being able to see like her parents, there's a reason why they are the way they are. They didn't just wake up one day and decide to have those type of personality traits or those type of fear of change. There's a reason behind it. And so I just love seeing that the main character has a slight, emotional growth. So there's a lot of other things that happen in the book. A lot of other relationships. I'm going to keep those like hidden from you guys because I definitely want you to read this book. Again, I can relate a lot to this book, but there's a lot of it, that it's just not my life story because again, I'm not first generation. So definitely suggest reading this for anybody. So again, it's a young adult book, but I'm 34 and I enjoyed it, so I'm pretty sure you guys can enjoy it too. Definitely support all our Latino and Latinx authors. Thank you guys so much for hearing me talk about this book, and I definitely hope you enjoy this review. I know it's a bit of a ramble, so hopefully in post when I'm editing it'll sound less like a ramble. We will see. But anyways, I actually have to start making dinner. Yeah, I gotta start making dinner, so let me actually go do that now. Don't forget to pick up this book. I will put the link in the description box below for where you guys can purchase this book, probably like Amazon to be honest, but you can definitely find it at your local bookstore. And that's it. Bye guys.